Thank you very much for that. Well, welcome to this Development Management Review Committee. Item 1, apologies or substitutions.
Yes, Convener, we have an apology from Councillor McLaren and Councillor Fotheringham is substituting.
Okay, and declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. Minutes of the previous meeting, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Right. Item 4, land at Barnes of Craig, Montrose. This is an application for the review of the decision taken by the planning authority in respect of refusal of planning permission in principle for the erection of a single house and access at land at Barnes of Craig, Montrose. Is the applicant or agent present?
Not today, Convener. Convener, just prior to moving on, I noticed Mr. Christensen has his hand up.
Oh, I see him there. Yeah, sorry. Paul, could you just...
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I think last time I read a statement out in terms of the a discrepancy I noticed in the paper. I just wondered if you wanted me to clarify that again, just in advance of a decision being taken.
You might as well do it just to make sure everybody's aware.
In reviewing the papers for today in respect of the matter that we're about to discuss, I've identified the discrepancy in the Planning Authority's report of handling relating to the assessment of drainage matters associated with the proposal. I'd like to clarify this matter for the committee prior to the determination of the review. Firstly, if I can draw the committee's attention to pages 14 and 17 in the committee report, you'll note that this is the full consultation response from Scottish Water, which concludes that they had no objections to the proposal and indicated that there is sufficient capacity for a foul-only connection in the Montrose wastewater treatment works. If I can take you back to pages 5 of the report, which is the Planning Authority's report of handling, you will note in the summary of the proposal that the applicant is proposing connection to the public drainage and water supply networks. On page 6 of the report of handling, under the summary of consultation responses, it states that Scottish Water have made no objections to the proposal. This position is accurate, and having reviewed available information to me, I can confirm the public drainage network passes adjacent to the site. However, on page 8 of the papers, under the assessment section, you will note that this indicates that Scottish Water offered no objection, but indicated there is no public wastewater infrastructure within the vicinity of this proposed development, and that the site is located within a SEPA wastewater drainage area, noted as having a proliferation of private drainage systems, and where SEPA is seeking a first-time public sewer. Again, I can confirm this statement is not accurate, in that, firstly, Scottish Water does not suggest that there is no public wastewater infrastructure within the vicinity of this proposed development, and secondly, the site is not in a SEPA wastewater drainage area. It is also important to note that drainage is not a reason for refusal of planning permission by the Planning Authority, and that the report of handling sets out that matters relating to drainage could be regulated by planning condition. I hope this clarifies the matter for members.
Thank you very much for that. Right, we had our site visit earlier today. Do members now have sufficient information to determine the review?
Yes.
If no further information is required, we can proceed to determination. Councillor Duff, you're the local councillor for that area. We'll start with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yeah, it's an area pretty well. I knew the site pretty well before we visited it this morning. I would start from the point of view that there's been a lot of new house building in that area between just outside Ferryden and Craig. A lot of new housing development. Immediately close to that site, we've had the Steading development, which I guess was done about 10 years ago, and that was obviously, you saw the stone-built Steading, but there are a number of houses that have been built round about that as part of that development. We've got the house that's further back from the site. I think it's called Bear-Les, which is also a reasonably modern house. And then on the other side of the Steading development, we didn't see it this morning, but there are 4 fairly large houses being built on that side. Again, that would have been built on, I imagine, agricultural sort of footprints, if you know what I mean. So my feeling is that there's been quite a lot of development in that area allowed by the council. The question is this a gap site, and is it rounding off 3 or more buildings? And I would say that, in my opinion, it is. That this is a gap between the setting development and the house that's, I think, called Berlays, and the road on the north side. And therefore, I would see that as an obvious gap site and as a rounding off. Now, clearly, there's a concern being expressed that is this opening the gate to a ribbon development, and I think I would say no, it isn't, because every application has to be considered on its merits. I think this one I would see as a rounding off. That's my opinion. It's it's not prime agricultural land, notwithstanding the fact it's covered in briars and trees. Even if it was pristine, it's too narrow now to be economically cultivated by anyone involved in agriculture. It's too narrow a strip of land, so I don't see that. It may have been a field 200 years ago, but it isn't suitable for agriculture now. So I think you have to take that into consideration. And I think the planning policy talks about the sort of 2020 Scottish planning policy talks about making sure that land is productively used. And this bit of land clearly isn't being productively used. So I think that would add some weight to our decision to approve this one.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. Councillor King?
Councillor Duff said pretty much all that I would have said. I was quite amazed when I came up to Barnes of Craig. It's the first time I've ever been there, just at the extent that's taken place on the old Barnes of Craig steadings. I mean, that's a little village. I mean, we see on the map on page, I'm looking at the map on page 103. No, beg your pardon, 103. And it shows 3, 4, 5 and 6. I presume 1 and 2. You get, as Councillor Duff said, there's 4 more houses further up. There's Berlays, there's the old Barnes of Craig farmhouse, all in that area. It's a very built up little part of that situation. And on that basis, I am viewing this as a gap site. I think the officers were correct to refuse it because it technically does not comply with policy. But when you look at that site, it's bounded on the north by a road, on the west by a road, on the south by another property, and as we saw when we were on site today, is bounded on the east by an established line of spruce or fir trees. If they'd been talking about going beyond that, as some of the drawings showed, I wouldn't have been prepared to accept this as a gap site. But I'm prepared to accept a gap site bounded by these 2 roads, the property at Berlays, and that particular line of trees. I see that as an appropriate infill site, but I would certainly be making it very, very clear that I would not be thinking of allowing anything east of the line of trees. To me, that is a natural boundary. And on that basis, I would be prepared to recognise that the officers refused this one correctly in technical terms, but having had a site visit and as the elected member, or one of the elected members on Dmrc, I'm prepared to overrule that particular decision and say that this, in my opinion, is a gap site.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. Councillor Fotheringham.
Thank you. Councillor Duff and Councillor King's actually presented this very well and covered the things. I was quite surprised this morning too. One, the view is absolutely beautiful. I know that's nothing to do with this. Just the amount of housing that's actually in the area, and as Councillor Duff says, it is reasonably well developed. And I think it's a rounding off. I think it's a gap site. I like Councillor King. I think the officers were absolutely correct for the reasons that they gave to refuse it. But I am going with Councillors Duff and King, and I think we should now, this should be approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fotheringham. Councillor Moore?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Yeah, I can understand the arguments that are being made. However, I'm looking at the map on page 105. And if we allow this, we are then going to have pressure to allow 2 or 3 more properties and create a ribbon development. So I think the officer's got it right. And on this occasion, I'm going to support the officer's decision and say that the appeal should be dismissed.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moore. I have to agree with Councillor King and Councillor Duff and Councillor Fotheringham. And I know the officers have refused it on DS1, DS3, DS4, TC2, PV6, PV15 and PV20. And I don't think it's, I think it's a gap site, and I think it should be passed. Do you need, Sarah, do you need notification of a coding for it, like a DS1 or a DS3 to be applicable? Or is it enough for us to say we think it's...
I think it would be helpful just for members to clarify. I mean, I know that obviously we've heard a bit of discussion, and from what I'm hearing, members are saying that you do feel that it is a gap site. It may just be helpful for clarity in relation to that, convener, please. See, Councillor Nicol has his hand up, and I don't know if Mr. Christensen would wish to come in terms of the reasons that he's heard.
Councillor Duff, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I would have thought it's a question of our interpretation of TC2. That TC2 talks about reasons where you can allow building in the countryside, and if we're interpreting this as a gap site, then under TC2 it would be allowable.
The residential development, yeah. But
I would agree with that.
agree.
Agreed.
So, agreed on a majority decision that it's passed.
Yep.
Convener, can I just clarify that Councillor Moore wouldn't wish to come in with an amendment to that?
4-1, I don't think I'd get a seconder.
Okay, convener, from what I've heard, then the appeal has been upheld.
Yes.
That would be with conditions to come back to a future meeting.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's
Can I
good.
suggest that we make sure that it's a conditions that is conditioned to one house only on the site? That's what was asked for.
Yeah.
But we put that in as a condition that only one house on the site, and that
That's
the eastern boundary is the line of fir trees.
good. Right, we'll move on to them. Item
Convener,
5.
sorry,
No?
convener, can I just ask Mr. Christensen if he wanted to make any comment in relation to that?
Yeah, I mean the application's they've only applied for principal for single house anyway, so I mean that's what they've applied for. There wouldn't be any conditions on the land beyond the line of the trees, and there would have to be conditions in terms of landscaping as well. So those conditions would come back at a later date.
Thank you very much. Item 5 then. Land east of Mains Bank House, Arbroath. This is an application for the review of the decision taken by the Planning Authority in respect of the refusal of planning permission for the erection of a dwelling house, formation of vehicular access and auxiliary works at land east of Mains Bank House, Arbroath. Is the applicant or agent present? No?
No, convener, no.
We had a site visit earlier today. Do members have sufficient information to determine the review? Yes?
Yes.
Yep.
If no further information is required, we can proceed to determine. Councillor King, you're the local councillor for the area.
Yes, this is a very different situation to the previous one. I think the officers have got this one absolutely right. This is the proposal to build a house in an area of, as described by the applicant, as scrub woodland, which I don't think is scrub woodland when I see it after the site visit today. There were a number of very well established trees, including Scots pine on it. There was a little bit of scrub self-seeded scrub, but there were quite a number of very large trees, which are actually shown on the plan on page 180. I'm not entirely sure that we could get a house in there without cutting down trees or without affecting the rootstock, the spread of the roots in there. Some of the pictures later on show the hedge, which was very dull and brown today, all along. So, you know, obviously in the summer, it's a very prominent feature in the landscape, and I don't see why that fence should be breached at all, just to allow a house in. And finally, I wasn't over impressed by the fact that the applicant had put in a new fence, obviously a new fence because it was new wood, just to reduce the length of the area, well, the length of the bit of road, the bit of the boundary that pressed with that move at all. And in fact, there are comments in the policy which say that that will not be allowed. As I said, I think the officers got this 100% right, and I think we should refuse this one.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. Councillor Moore is the other Arbroath councillor.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I fully agree with Councillor King here. When I look at the plan on page 180, it doesn't show anywhere near the number of trees that are on that site. It just shows them round the boundary. I don't think that you could build a house without damaging trees. And the applicant admits that they would have to take some out and part of the hedge for the access. And I think that is totally unacceptable. And I think the officers have got this spot on.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moore. Councillor Fotheringham, your comments?
Yes, Convener, thank you. Like Councillor King and Councillor Moore as the local members, the officers have got this one absolutely spot on. I agree with Councillor King's comments. It certainly was a bit of self-seeded scrub that we saw this morning, but there's also a lot of very mature established trees. And like the two local members, there's absolutely no way they get a house in there without removing some of them and, as Councillor King says, breaching the hedge. And I noticed, as Councillor King mentioned as well, the brand new fence that's been put up, and I think we all know the reason that that's been put up. So yes, no, I'm going to stick with this decision and refuse. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fotheringham. Councillor Duff.
Yes, yes, Convener, I'd agree with my colleagues in this one. I think Councillor King has encapsulated my views pretty well, so I'm quite happy to support the decision made by officers on this one. I think it's very different from the first one.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. I have to agree with you, with all four of you, and I think the minute if it had been passed, the fence would have come down again. We'd have had a larger site again. So, but I agree with the officers, and we should go with the officer's decision in this instance, and refuse the application. Is that okay, Sarah?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Just to confirm that the appeal has been dismissed.
Yes, the appeal has been dismissed. That's
Okay, thank you.
One for and one against. That's a draw today. Thank you very much. So that's the end of the meeting, and thank you all for coming along.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.